Papua New Guinea is a fascinating place with an interesting history. It's one of the most culturally and naturally diverse places in the world, and still to this day one of the least explored areas of the globe. And it's also one of the main origins of human agriculture, with a lot of different plants having been first domesticated here and then spread out to other places. So let's take a look at a few of the common food plants around here, both wild and domesticated, and unfamiliar and possibly familiar. So let's start out with a simple leafy vegetable, the rungia, or mushroom plant, or any of other various names. This one is likely native here and also first domesticated here somewhere in the highlands of Papua New Guinea, and this is actually also where it's still most popularly grown. In fact, it's one of the most widely grown plants here in Papua New Guinea, with about 40% of the rural population growing it. So these are great as a basic green, very high in vitamin C, vitamin A, also in calcium. They work well just raw in salads, although usually people here will eat them cooked, usually with other vegetables and meat. So they kind of have a cucumbery taste to them. Some say mushroom, which is where it gets the name mushroom plant. I don't see that so much. Even when cooked, they say the mushroom taste gets stronger. To me, it tastes strongly spinachy, but I guess taste is kind of subjective, and different varieties may differ in that. But it's a nice looking plant. You can see some of these plants have very prominent yellow veins on them. Nice little blue flowers as well. Very easy to grow from cuttings as well. Just take a cutting and stick it in the ground, and usually it'll root into a new plant. Not a lot else I could find to say about these plants, but a great little green, worth a try. So these might be a familiar plant to some of you, as they are growing around the world in a lot of warmer places, including lots of Latin America, Africa, Asia, Oceania. You might know it as chayote, maleton, choco, saco, or a few other names as well. It's originally from Central America, but it's since been introduced to a lot of other places, including here. It's a recent introduction, but it's become quite popular, to the point that some groups will use this as their main source of greens. So it's a cucurbit, meaning it's in the same family as gourds, squashes, and cucumbers, and like them, it's a long climbing vine, sometimes as much as 15 meters long. You can see on this tree here how it's climbed right up, and at first glance, it almost looks like the tree is the one producing this spiky fruit here. Now, not all of the fruits are spiky. That depends on the individual plant. Here, a lot of them are spiky, though. And the whole plant is actually edible. The fruits are sort of like a very firm zucchini, not very flavorful on their own, but good for adding body to a dish when cooked. They can be eaten raw too, but that seldom happens because they are quite hard. One of the neat things about these is that each fruit has a single seed inside, and when it's ready, it'll get pushed partway out of this fold at the bottom and start sprouting right in the fruit. And if the seed is removed, it quickly dries out and dies. So to plant these, usually people just stick a whole fruit in the soil and let it grow. So somewhat surprisingly, this is the most commonly eaten part of the chayote plant, but it's also the least nutritious. So the plants produce these big tubers underground that can be up to about 5 kilograms. They're seldom used here for food, but they are quite edible and can be used kind of like a yam. And the purpose of these tubers are for the plant to store up energy so that if the vine gets cut down, it's quite easy for it to spring back. And so these plants are pretty hard to kill because of that. And the tips of the vines are quite tender and quite edible, and a lot of people here like them so much that even though they're only introduced here in the last few decades, in some groups, they've pretty much become the staple green, replacing some more traditional crops and being something people just eat every day. One little anecdote I enjoy about chayotes, though, they're not very flavorful on their own. Like, think a mild zucchini, but less flavor. And so, great if you add flavor to them, but on their own they're pretty bland. In Australia, there's a common rumor that McDonald's, instead of using apples in their apple pies, actually uses chayotes. It's not true, but I guess it kind of speaks to the quality of their apple pies. Anyway, so next up, the water dropwort, or gutuya as it's known locally. So these ones, at first glance, have kind of a fern-like leaf, which often happens when you're looking at the carrot family. The dead giveaway here that it's in the carrot family, though, is the flowers. See, the carrot family always has these tiny umbrella-shaped clusters of flowers within a larger umbrella-shaped cluster. And this whole cluster together is called an umbel. Do always be careful when you're out picking in the wild and you see flower clusters like that, and make sure you know what you're picking, because while the carrot family has a lot of good edibles, it also has some of the most poisonous plants in the world, and a few that can cause some pretty serious rashes just from touching them. Now, if you're from East or Southeast Asia, there's a good chance you know these vegetables already. It's got a very wide native range, and an even wider range where it's grown for food. You'll find it throughout a lot of India, China, Vietnam, Indonesia, Malaysia, and of course here in Papua New Guinea. But even as far north as Japan, this is quite an important herb. This is one of the 7 herbs they use in their Festival of 7 Herbs in January, which is sort of a way to welcome in the new year. At that point in the winter, of course, traditionally they would have had very little color in their diet because, well, it's winter, not a lot of colorful stuff is growing for you to eat. So this was just a way to kind of, bring back some cheer, a reminder of spring that's coming. So these are a very important crop here in Papua New Guinea as well, very easy to grow, and you'll notice that the stems here are hollow. That gives them a lot of buoyance, so they're able to float on the water, and if they're near a stream, just kind of, keep spreading themselves along the banks there. And that's partly where it gets its name, water drop wort. Wort here being an old English name for plant. You can use these like a lot of other greens. They've got a very nice crunch to them, so they're great to eat raw, but also steamed, eaten with rice. Very high in vitamin A, C, and E. But one thing I've enjoyed around here, there's these popular sausages here. They're not quite hot dogs, but they look pretty similar. And a couple times when I've had them, these have been used as the bun. So just wrapped up in greens and eaten like that. So looking for a good gluten-free bun alternative? Greens can be pretty good. Now these are a fun little fruit. Watery rose apples, or lau lau as they call them here. They're like the smaller, less flavorful version of the Malay apple, which is a more widely grown species and also goes by the name of lau lau here. But that said, this is still a refreshing little fruit. And a fun bell shape to it too, or campanulate as you would say in scientific lingo. So they're native to here, Australia, Southeast Asia, and they're quite commonly grown in a lot of these areas. As you can guess from the name, this is a very watery fruit, often even above 90% water, which is in the same ballpark as watermelon. Very crunchy with a slightly sweet flavor to it, maybe a few floral notes to it, hence probably the rose part of the name. Now, the city of Goroka nearby here, it does have clean drinking water, but a lot of places around here don't. So, in places like this, eating fruits like this can be a great way to help replenish your fluids, and also get a bit of vitamin A and C at the same time. Usually these are just eaten fresh, they're great for hydrating then, but they can be sliced up and put into salads. Some people will also boil them down to make a syrup. But one thing too, they're also surprisingly long lasting, and if you keep them in the fridge, they can be good for months on end. The leaves are actually edible too if you get them when they're still tender. Now you can use them just fresh, or you can use them to wrap other foods to roast, or sometimes people would even use them dried and then mixed in with other cooked vegetables. And these leaves are traditionally used to treat malaria, pneumonia, and dysentery. I couldn't find any medical research that had been done on this, but research has suggested anti-malarial properties in Coqueza, which is another tree in the same genus. So, any researchers watching? Might be worth investigating. But anyway, that's all I have for this week. With that, I'll wrap up. As always, if you have any corrections, suggestions, or passing remarks, or if you think one of these plants deserves its own video, feel free to comment that down below. And if you enjoyed this video and learned something and would like to see more, liking and subscribing always really helps me out. This video was made on behalf of the Goroka Natural Habitat, a place looking to preserve a slice of Papua New Guinean highland forest for education, research, enjoyment, and to teach people to cultivate honey at the same time. A huge thank you to Kelly Enai for letting me stay here and supporting this project. If you're looking for a great place to volunteer as a researcher, carpenter, teacher, beekeeper, fish pond specialist, mushroom grower, or any of other numerous other specialties, this is a great place to do it. So, for more practical and otherwise interesting plants of Papua New Guinea, join me next time on Ambling with Sam.